Well, welcome, friends. We are so excited to have you join us for today's employability workshop. We're at session 5. I'm Ron Brooks with Truett's Grill. I am joined today by a couple of special guests. Actually, one you're very familiar with by now. Melissa Gordon is with us. She is my co-host, and she is here to make sure that we keep things not only active and energized, but on a good track so that you're always learning and always growing in these topics that we're calling subtopics of employability. Melissa, how are you feeling today?
Doing good. It's Monday, but it kind of feels like Thursday.
Well, I'll take that as a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
Let's do that. Melissa, we've explored so much that's just saturated with richness. I feel like I've grown a lot while we've welcomed our various guests over the week. We've had 8 super duper guests along the way. I feel like a cartoon character. 8 super duper guests along the way, and we've learned so much about things like communication. We've talked about teamwork. We've talked about problem solving, and every time it just seems like it gets better. I think it can't get better than this, and yet the next one seems like we top it. So I can't wait. Today we have a fabulous guest who's going to talk with us about planning and organizing. So why don't you get us into that, and then we'll sweep around to some Q&A. By the way, before we get into this, you'll notice that there's an option to download a little note sheet. So it has some information about our guest today. It has some of the outline about this employability concept and a place for you to take some notes today. So having said that little bit of housekeeping, Melissa, why don't you get us into the actual material of the session today?
Sure. I'm really honored to have the guest that we have with us today. I'm going to read her bio. I'm going to stick to that because we were joking around at an event earlier that I was going to make up her bio. So
I was kind of excited about that too, Melissa. Thank you.
Well, you gave me some good stuff to go with. Like apparently she's related to Faith Hill. Or are you?
No, but you wanted some good stuff, so I was making it up.
You can see the family resemblance. Well, I'm going to read her real bio. We're very fortunate to have Andrea Griffin with us today. And I'm reading it off. After an 18-year career in management in the wireless industry, Andrea Griffin shifted to banking. She has served as the marketing director of the First National Bank for the past 6 years. Her role includes advertising for the bank, as well as teaching personal finance classes to the community as an outreach for the bank. Andrea is a graduate of the University of West Georgia with a Bachelor of Business Administration. 32 years ago this summer, Andrea traveled the world with the internationally acclaimed Up With the People. A busy mom of 2 teens, Kylie, a sophomore at Georgia Tech, and Ben, a junior at Spalding High School, Andrea still finds time to give back to her community. Andrea was named the chairman for the Griffin Spalding Chamber of Commerce for 2021. And it's an honor to work with you and do things with you, Andrea. And I am so grateful and thankful that you were able to do this with us today. So we are very excited to hear your perspective, because I can tell you one thing I know, Andrea loves organizing things. So yeah, I've seen this working with the chamber. She loves to organize things. So from that perspective of the chamber and also professionally, Andrea, please share with us some tidbits of wisdom that we can take forward in all of our listeners.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to get to the topic at hand, but I am an organizer. I think about everything in an orderly manner, from the way my closet is organized to anything that I plan. There's always a joke, in town, let Andrea plan it first, and then she'll hand you the notebook that tells you how to do it, because there's going to be some order to what I've done. And as I was thinking about today and being ready to go into the job force, really planning and organizing starts before you get there. That's very important. During the 18 years that I worked with Verizon Wireless, I actually oversaw over 50 of their locations and had the opportunity to hire and train and develop lots of people for that organization. And so when I think about, okay, I'm ready for my interview, how do I get organized? I think the first thing you have to do, you have to know the company you're going to be interviewing with. We are more fortunate than I was when I was interviewing for jobs right out of college, that you can get all kinds of information right off the internet. The next thing you should do is also know the person that you're going to be speaking with. If possible, Google their name and see what you can find out about them, because knowing the company and knowing the person will really help you get organized for the actual interview. The next thing I would recommend is, as you're putting together your resume, and you may have already talked about this, again, the resume is it's an order of what you've done, why hire you. I would have lots of people look at it. Don't just look at something online and put it together. I had a professor look at my resume as I was going through this process. Resumes change over time. You can find funny resumes. You can find different order to the resume, but have a professor look at it with you. Have a friend look at it, before you actually submit it as you're going through the hiring process. And then the other thing that I would just make sure that's part of being orderly and ready for your interview is to not be on time, but to be early. So many times I found that people are trying, like if you have a 10 o'clock interview, they're trying to time it to be there at 10 o'clock. And we know things do and happen all the time. So try to prepare to be there 20 minutes early so that you are on time, even if you have to sit in the car and listen to music, play on your phone. But part of being organized for the interview is actually being early.
Andrea, those are phenomenal, like little nuggets. And I know that each one of those, here's what I'm thinking, like you're going through this list. I bet every one of those, you could unpack some stories about both how you've seen it work well and how you've seen it work poorly. But let me start with something. Melissa, jump in here. It is basically my understanding of the way we work through personality, applying personality theory here at Truett's, that there are those who are basically sort of organically organized. They just come to the party already as naturally organized, and some, like myself, who are glad those people exist, so trains still do not run on time, but actually stay on the tracks. So for those of us, for a minute, if we can start with a bias, who need the help, what are some things that are great starting points to say, I want to go at being organized? I'm not ever going to maybe be one of those naturally organized people, but you've given us these great little nugget points. Are there places in life where I can start that are going to impact the way I do my job, that I can say, I'm going to just take this on and become more organized? What would you tell somebody who's asking that?
Okay, well, I'm going to make you laugh because I already have my list of things to do for tomorrow. I always put a little heart on it. It just makes me happy. It's got the date. It's got things I have to get done. And I've taken numerous classes because I love to be organized. I've taken numerous classes on how to be better organized, which is always funny to me. And so I have things that the day cannot end without it happening, because I call those my A priorities. B priorities, I would love to get done, but they don't have to be. And then C's, I can move around. So I don't always put the letter on there, but I know in my mind, I have to absolutely be done, needs to be done, and then could be moved to another day. So I've already done it because I knew we'd be on this call, but I make a list every single day for my day. And I actually have a list of things that have to be done around my house too, because I'm just kind of a list person. But so that's my big tip for how to start getting organized, is to write it down.
Melissa, that was worth the price of admission. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I was listening, and one of the things that came to my mind is I have a mother of three. I have two who are not organized at all, and one that's pretty organized. And they range in ages from college student to elementary school. But so I won't say who's who. But one of the things that I started in my house, because I realized at least one of the older ones, will say, is not organized. And so really just that use of a calendar in a central location at our house become one of the things that I do, because I'm kind of like you, Andrea. I'm a list, got to get it done. And I like to see it crossed off my list kind of person. But I'm okay that not everybody is that way. But when I see that there's weaknesses in it, especially like with my own kids, how can I impact that? And so the use of that calendar in the central location of the family house, and really sort of prompting my less organized children to be the ones to say, hey, what's on the calendar for tomorrow? Who needs a lunch tomorrow? Who's working tomorrow?
just sort of that purposeful drawing their attention to it has started to help a little bit. So I thought that was interesting you said that, Andrea, because I see that right in my own house.
I was also going to share, I don't expect I have two children, and I don't expect them to be organized the way I am. I think being a parent takes you to a certain level of you have to get things done. You have to be orderly to know what's going on in your family. And we also have a calendar. It's color coordinated, which I love. I love markers and crayons and all that fun stuff. But I realized my daughter seems to be more organized the way I am. She thinks in an orderly fashion. She makes lists. She has a calendar. My son is organized, but in a different way. And I'll give you an example. Today was the first day in Spalding County that they went back to school. Well, organized to him is messy to me. So I had moved some stuff around his room and put it where I thought it needed to be. So this morning he gets up and he's like, I don't know what's happened to my backpack. I know my backpack is here. I had my backpack here. And he knew, because he knows what his order mess is like. Anyway, I said, oh, I know where the backpack is. I organized it. So I have to remember in life, in business, and certainly with my children, that they may be organized in a different way and know where everything is, and not be like, here's the list, let's mark it off. So there's different levels of organization.
That is so helpful, because I know one of the things that can be a difficulty for some people is feeling like I can never do that, so I should not even try, because I just am not going to be that way. And that would be inappropriately defeating. That is not what we're saying. We're talking about, and I love, Melissa, that you added this. We're saying that for those of us who are challenged in that way, there are systems that are going to be able to help us. We should make the most of those systems, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the things too, and especially when you're thinking about employment, and obviously we're looking at various phases. We're talking a good bit so far today. We've been really kind of talking about that, preparing for the interview. But, one of the other things that we've sort of delved into in some of these sessions has been being an employee too. And one of the things that can, and this doesn't just stand for organization, it stands for a lot of things. Pay attention to how your supervisor acts. What are the things that your supervisor puts into place? Or what behaviors do your coworkers that you see who have moved up in the organization, what are some of the behaviors that they've put in place that you can learn from? And I think that's a key thing. We talked about teachability just last week. And that's one of the things, is what can you learn from those around you, whether it's your supervisors or your coworkers. And organization skills are certainly one of those. Lee is probably better aware of this than anybody else on the call. I have a pretty crazy looking calendar. I'm not going to share it because it's almost embarrassing. I see you laughing. It's almost embarrassing, and it is color coded and it is full. And it can be anything as simple as reminding me that I need to go put water on the coffee pot before I leave work today, to something really major. But everything's on my calendar. And I learned to use my Outlook calendar, which is what we use at the University of Georgia. Most state agencies use Outlook, from a previous employee that worked for me, who watched me struggling with a notebook that was chock full of notes, and was finally like, look, I'm going to bring you into the 2000s. This was many years ago. We're going to put the book away, and I'm going to show you how to use this calendar on your computer, and you don't have to worry about losing your book. But that's just one example of learning from the people around you, especially with technology. Let people around you help you and improve. Yeah. Maybe not improve in the way that my calendar looks, Lee, but it works for me. I want to add something in, because one of the notes I made as Andrea was talking, you mentioned, it's funny, I had this conversation with someone else. First thing this morning, we were talking about this series, as a matter of fact, someone from another organization. And we were talking about the idea that if you're on time, you're late. And Andrea brought that up, and that's definitely an organization issue generally. But I fervently agree with that statement. If you're on time, you're late, especially when you're talking about coming for an interview.
Absolutely.
If your interview's at 8 o'clock, you should be there, before the security guard gets there to unlock the doors. You should be sitting in the parking lot waiting. And certainly should be in as quickly as possible, to show that you're understand time
how valuable time is to people, but also it shows your respect. I think your respect of scheduling and whatnot, and just for you in general. But I wonder, I wrote down, what does this look like in the virtual world? Because, things are a little different right now. And I know a lot of people are doing interviews virtually now. And so I wonder, has anybody had any experience with doing interviews and how that might look a little differently in the virtual world? Look at crickets.
Andrew, what do you think? Have you seen that interaction?
No, but I would say, just like preparing for a Zoom call, I want to be on the call before the person, starts the video. So I would say with an interview, I would rather, as the person being interviewed, be sitting there before the person logs the call on. I just think, like you said, Melissa, it shows respect. It also kind of sets the stage for what kind of employee this is going to be. I guess that's what I'm always looking at. I know we're not talking about how people dress, but being dressed for your interview is always a big thing, even if it's, on a Zoom call. I know that I've seen several very, very funny commercials on television where people are only dressed appropriately from the waist up, Cutler's coffee commercial, several others where they have on shorts or other things and they get embarrassed. So think about that, because maybe something happens and you stand up and, you want to be properly dressed for your interview. So.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it was actually one of the notes I made. Isn't this great, Melissa? Because we just sit and soak things in, and it takes us to the next place, sort of prompting these next step questions. So thank you, Andrea, for indulging so many of those. So it occurred to me that appearance may be suggesting some things, either actually suggesting about my level of organization, or a parent level. In other words, what does my appearance suggest about my organization? Because if I'm an employer and we do this, I do automatically think, what does that presentation tell me if I'm about to trust, in our case, if I'm about to trust, hundreds of guests a day to this person, are they going to be able to manage the details? Or, a lot of things happen in our kitchen. Are they going to be able to manage the details that are at work in our systems? So how critical is it, even things like dress and presentation, and how do you read that as an employer, as an interviewer?
Well, I will tell you a funny story. So my parents years ago said to me, you should always dress for the job you want. And so my very first job interview, I was 15 years old, was at Wendy's Hamburgers here in Griffin, Georgia. And I wore a business suit, had a resume, and carried a briefcase. And when I walked in, the manager said, I think you're at the wrong place. I said, no, I'm here to interview for the cook or whatever it was you start out, basically lower level, anything, just I want a job. And she said, I have been a manager of a Wendy's for 15 years. Not once has anybody wore a business suit. Now, I know I made an impression that day. I did get a job, and I'm not always saying you should wear a suit, but at least know what you need to have on. If you're going for certain types of jobs, they're fine with shirts and jeans, others, they may, you might want to dress up. So know what you're applying for. When I look back, I probably wouldn't have done that again, but I did make an impression that day on the manager.
I'll throw something in here real quick, if you don't mind. It kind of goes back to Melissa's point also about virtual, because actually, when I was hiring for the position under me, we actually did that initial interview virtually. And I think when it comes to presentation also, keep in mind that when you're on camera, there's things behind you, and you're in control of what that is. So I wasn't going to call you out, Melissa, because I see your files back there, but being mindful of, what's around you also.
Like, what's behind me today? Well, I want to jump back to the virtual thing too, because one of the other things because I thought I hadn't considered the virtual piece when we were talking about this, but let's face it, that's kind of where we're going with, much of everything we're doing is virtual now. But, with all the different platforms, I was just, before this, I was on a call with another college, and they used a platform that's not what we use. It wasn't Zoom, which we're using right now. We tend to use a lot at UGA. It was something totally different. And we had technical issues. Well, it wasn't that big of a deal. I just emailed the person I need to talk to, said, hey, this isn't working. But what if I was interviewing with her? The thing I would have wanted to do is I would have wanted to try out that link way before meeting time, make sure
I knew how it worked. And it's funny, a lot of what I work with is with potential students for coming here to UGA Griffin. And I get a few of those because most of the meetings I schedule now are not where people are coming to my office. We're meeting via Zoom. And it almost warms my heart when I hear my email go off in the middle of the night, because when somebody logs into my Zoom room, I get an email, right, Lee? Okay. Right. I hear that noise. I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I do occasionally have those students who will go into my room at 2 o'clock in the morning. That sounded creepy as I said it, didn't it? Everybody's awake now. And I'll look and I'll be thinking, oh, John, I have a meeting with him at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Well, John wanted to make sure he knew how to get into the meeting. And that told me something already about those students. And so the same is true for employees. You know, if you're going to interview and I notice that somebody's trying to log into my Zoom room at 3 o'clock in the morning, I know that you were serious. You wanted to make sure you knew how to get in and you were showing that respect that we talked about. And I think that's an important thing for all of us to remember, because regardless of the type of job, you may be interviewing virtually. Make sure you know how to use that platform and ask questions if you don't know. I don't mind when people ask questions.
I need to expand on that too, is whenever you're doing virtually through a webcam, like there's more to the appearance of just what's behind you, what you're wearing. Also, I mean, like keep in mind, like, you know, well lit, you know, because you don't want to be in a dark room and, you know, they can't really see you. And then, and pretty much any platform, they have tools built in where if you go in ahead of time, even if the person's not there, you can test out your camera, you can test out your speakers and microphones. So that way, when you don't jump into the meeting, you're scrambling trying to figure out why they can't hear you. You know, you can do all that stuff ahead of time, and it just looks better, you know, like more well prepared. Because if you come into a room and they can't hear you and you spend the first 10 minutes of the interview trying to figure out that issue, not a good look.
Wasted somebody's time, right?
Yeah.
Nobody likes their time wasted.
Well, that is so rich. And so you're doing things that I love that this conversation has gone this place, because we're talking about things that are very much part of our new landscape. And I suppose that we all feel this way, that for whatever, if you would say progress we make towards some kind of normalcy, we'll never go back to what it has been. We've learned too much sort of, if nothing else, traveling efficiency, that we don't have to go as many places to accomplish things, to connect. So Andrea, you gave us some excellent information about some things that we could do to begin with. For example, and Melissa, you hopped onto this train as well with the calendaring, but you said list and you showed us your list. And so making a list is one way to go about being organized. Forgive me if this sounds too granular, but it's a question I might have asked 20 years ago. Then my follow-up would be a list of what? If I don't make lists, what would be on my list if that's just never been part of my life?
Okay, so it depends on what the list is for. Okay, because I have all kinds of lists. But like if I'm a college student, it would certainly have the date, because you want to know what day you're working on the list. Because if the lists are all made on the same size or sheet of paper, you would want to know this is the list for this particular day. Usually the top section of the list, again, I still have a calendar, but I like to put what I have to do. So like I have an 8 o'clock meeting, a 12 o'clock lunch with a friend, and a 4:30 meeting. So tomorrow, so I can see that right away. I know. Yes. Is my Outlook calendar going to ding? Also, yes, but it's just right in front of me. Then if there's other things that are just work related that I need to get done, I put them on the list. So that could be for students. It could be a school assignment. It could be, you might want to start working on, a project, again, if you're a student and that's what you were doing. I know my daughter, when she got to college, it was very different than being in school. Even though she was a very busy high school student, college was just very different. And so she started using the list system, and she does hers in a notebook. It just works out better for her. Me, I want the list from the day before to be gone. So like I work through it, move it to another list, get rid of the first list. But she has a notebook, and that way she can refer back to something, like if there's something that she missed or want to remember what day she had to do something. She has a notebook. So sometimes people can use notebooks rather than just an individual piece of paper for their list.
Excellent. So I heard, so assignments, I heard, I don't know if you use this word, but I wrote tasks
Yes.
for the day, projects. And you said something that made me think it. The way I operate with those, and I'm sure you've used these, if you do very much in a business setting, and if you're thinking about this today, whether you've used this or not, it's going to be a helpful piece, I think, using what we call Gantt charts, or something where you've got a calendar outline. So you're able to look down the road and think, if I've got something that has to be completed in 3 weeks, what do I need to have done for that in 2 weeks? What do I need to have done for that in 1 week? And that could be as simple as, if we're talking about getting ready for an interview, when do I need to wash my clothes, or when do I need to make sure I have my wardrobe set aside? How much time is it going to take me to travel to the interview site? And that's the same thing with work. If I have a chronic issue with being on time, what do I need to adjust in the schedule? So can you follow up a little more with that, thinking about how to track and plan to be on time, not just for work or for an interview, but to be sort of on time with tasks and projects and things to get done?
I think it's not the same for every person. For people who are, I'd rather get it done up front and cruise into the project. You're gonna prepare one way, and I'm one of those. I want to get it done, and then the week before I want to review it, make sure it's how I want to submit it, and then still turn it in on time. I rarely turn in a project more than a day early, because I have looked at it, changed it, looked at it, changed it, but it's done early. Then you have others who are like, well, I'm going to think about it for a little bit, and then I'm going to be busy that last week to get it done. So being able to decide, like using your example, Ron, where you got 3 weeks, you got a project due in 3 weeks, I have to say to myself, okay, which person am I going to be for this project? Because you can be who you want to be. I tell my kids that all the time. So if you are the procrastinator type person, you really need to know, okay, I'm going to think for a day or two about my project or whatever has to be done. I will start preparing it, but then I'm doing it, and it's going to take this amount of time. So you really have to schedule that. The opposite happens, hey, if you're thinking through your project and you're going to do it and then coast into the end, it's just you schedule it just slightly differently depending on where you're going to put in the bulk of the work.
Melissa, that was gold to me. What do you think? Because I heard, and I love the fact, Andrew, that you said there's a legitimacy to both ways of doing it. If I'm not that we call it this, but if I'm the A type in what you just said, I don't need to try to be a B. Or if I'm in the B type, I don't need to try to be an A. I just need to accommodate my style and make sure that I've got the pieces to implement it. Melissa, that I think, would you say, especially your work with students, would you say that helps a great deal for them to know they don't need to become the other kind of person, because that would be defeating? What they need is a system that supports their way of doing things. What do you think?
I agree. And I think something that Andrea said, I hope I took this correctly, because I see it for myself. I can be both of those kinds of people, what the task is. And that kind of goes back to something we talked about way early, is kind of know thyself. There are certain tasks that I want to get done now. And like Andrea said, be able to just kind of check up on them as I go. And there are others that I just know within myself, I'm going to spread it out. I'm either because I'm not happy with what I have to do, or it's not something I'm looking forward to, or it's something I need to learn in order to do it correctly. I know that I think it's important to know who you are and look at the task that needs to be done and think, okay, which personality of me is going to be addressing this task, and how do I need to create my plan of action? And that's kind of how I always look at things, is how I need to create. I've got this big task coming up. And so the first thing that's going to go on my calendar is to create a POA, or a plan of action. That's my task number one. And it may get spread out across multiple days for many weeks, or it may get spread out across multiple hours for one day. And I think that's an important thing to say. Think about how you know you're going to handle this. Don't lie to yourself. Know yourself.
And something else I just wanted, I'm sorry, Ron.
No, please go ahead, Andrew. Yes.
And something I just wanted to add, that I've seen frustration certainly all through years of working with people. If you have a project where someone else is involved, it never fails. You've got the one who wants to get it done right away and the one who's willing to procrastinate. So know the people in the group, know who you're working with, but and try to pick someone who is going to be on task with all the different personalities to still make sure it's done on time. Because I've seen myself, I hate to say this, if I don't take the lead on this, it's not going to get done. That's what I tell myself every time. I'm taking the lead. I'm in the project. Hey, here's your role, your role, your role. Here's your deadline, and let's roll. So know the type of people you're working with, because that's to me the most frustrating is when someone has an assignment, you think we're going to be done a week ahead, and they are rolling in to want to be done the day of the project.
So now that brings up an important part. I had a different question in mind, but let me go to that. What if you're current? I think, okay, I'm currently in a job. I'd like to go to a different place. I want to make progress in this job, but my boss or supervisor is a different kind. Either I'm the one who waits, and my boss is that front end organizer, or vice versa. How do I best navigate those kinds of circumstances to still be me, but to make the most of where I am in my work situation to be able to make progress?
Nobody wants to say that.
Well, I would say you have to know your boss. My boss and I are very different. I love personality styles. I love learning to work with different personalities. There's lots of tests for what kind of person you are. Which I always think is very interesting, but you always want to speak your boss's language. So figure out what type of person they are. Not necessarily do it their way, not necessarily change yourself, but if you're working directly with someone like a boss, you can really try to work with them in their style.
That is so, I heard two really, really critical things. Melissa, feel free to jump in this, but I'll say the two, I want to give it back to both of you. So number one, speak your boss's language. So you're not becoming that person, but you need to be able to respond to whatever their expectations are, either to meet them or to negotiate a way that you don't have to meet them, but still satisfy their expectations. So speak your boss's language was one thing critical you said. And another thing, I'm not sure if you're referring this, but I know that Myers-Briggs, one of the popular type of styles of personality assessments, uses that kind of language, learn to speak another type's language. There's 16 of those. But what that led me to think is how critical is, so I want to be able to still hold on to that, speak your boss's language if there's follow-up to say. But the other thing is, how important would it be for me to know my personality style when we're talking about organizations, so that I have an organizational strategy? What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think that's one of the things that unfortunately, I think sometimes it comes with time. I think, if we're talking about, and this isn't true for everyone, but if we're talking, if you're that 16 or 17-year-old maybe listening to this, that's something that may not be fully clear to you yet, what your organizational or your communication styles are. It's there, but it's definitely still evolving. But I think as for those college students who are about to enter the workforce, I think it's important to do those things like those Myers-Briggs assessments. And there's all sorts of them out there. There's tons of them on the internet. And not to say that all of those are scientifically founded, but I think they give you a good idea of communication style and give you an idea of what to look for in others. And I know over the years, that's something that's really been very beneficial to me. I don't mind saying, I realize I'm a rare communication style. Look at Lee. Lee has laughed at me so many times and he thinks I don't see his face. But that's been very helpful to me to realize that some of the things and the ways that I do things or think about things are definitely not the way that others do. But that's a very good thing for me to know, so that when I'm communicating with others, whether it's a supervisor or a peer or whomever, to stop and go, oh, wait, you're weird, Melissa. Remember that. You're the weird one. So stop and think, how are they hearing it? What does this mean for them? And I think there's a lot of credibility to that. I want to jump somewhere real quick, and I'm sorry. Andrea's saying some good stuff, and the whole virtual stuff just took me aback. I didn't even see us going there. But one thing that came out of the last conversation that I think is important for people to realize. Okay, Andrea, when you were going for that first job at Wendy's, all right, maybe not was where you saw yourself for the next 20 years. Probably not. This was your first job, right? Okay. My first job was at the Dairy Queen in Forsyth. And I'll be honest with you, I have told the man who still owns it that I would go back in a minute for the right price. Best job ever. But he said he wouldn't pay me what I wanted. So I'm not. But my point with that is,
when you're going for an interview at a location for which you see yourself for a significant amount of time, maybe not Wendy's, maybe not a Dairy Queen job, it is just as much an interview for you to be interviewed by the employer as it is you to interview,
Absolutely.
because it may not be a fit. And I had one of those situations. I won't say where or who, but I knew within 15 minutes into the interview that I didn't want the job. It wasn't for me. And that was okay. And maybe they didn't want me either, but I knew immediately, because by asking questions of that organization, I realized what their mission was. It wasn't directly in line with mine. It just wasn't a fit. So I think it's important to think about that. The interview goes both ways. Had to throw that in there. Very disorganized, right?
That was lovely. It was entirely lucid. Because, and Andrew, you will not have as much of this awareness. Maybe, I'm not sure if you tuned into any of those, but we did speak about that in the interview process, and it was a very helpful part of that. Are there questions, Andrea, with whether you're experienced at Verizon or now at First National Bank, are there questions that you wish people would ask more? I mean, I know they have to be somewhat generic because we're talking about, a broad base of applications here, but are there questions you think either are helpful for candidates to ask, or ones you wish they would ask more? Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
One in particular is related to the specific job you may be applying for. Some jobs where you go to work, your manager is checking in with you all day long. Someone is directly managing you. You're being supervised. I mean, you see your supervisor all day long. I have been very blessed. Most of my career, both careers, that I rarely see my boss. I'm self-managed. It takes a lot of organization to do that. How my boss and I work together, I check in with him once a week, kind of give him a little update of what's going on, let him know what's coming down the road, what we need to be doing, but it's up to me. So one of the main questions you would want to ask is this job one where I'm supervised every day, or do I have to self-manage myself? Because if you are not organized, I have seen people in roles like that over the course of my years in business where they can't manage themselves.
Wow, that's fabulous. Melissa, you're with students a lot of your time. Drawing from that experience, are there questions that you think, or maybe things that they need to know? Andrea began this by talking about need to know both the interviewer and the company. Are there questions that you think students, and we're not just talking about students, when our webinars reaches far more than those who are currently pursuing an undergrad degree or even a graduate degree, but thinking about it from maybe a novice or someone who has less experience with pursuing a job or pursuing promotions, are there questions that you think would be useful, or ways of thinking about potential jobs or potential employers that you think would be useful for the people you work with day in and day out?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm answering the question that you're asking. I apologize.
No, it took a long time. So answer the question you'd like to answer.
Just answer a question randomly. No, I was thinking about one of the things I was thinking about was really the idea of knowing the company and the person with whom you're going to interview. You don't always know who's going to be doing your interview, but you may. I do think there's a lot of importance on that. Researching the company, researching the vision and the mission of the company. This would, maybe be a next level job that you're looking at. Make sure you know what this company is about. Do a lot of research. And, even if the person who calls you to schedule the interview, if you get their name, Facebook is probably not the best place to do your looking. LinkedIn is where you want to go. LinkedIn, because I know a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to look them up on Facebook. Well, okay, maybe. But LinkedIn, the professional social media network, is a really good place. And I know in the professional world, a lot of times when I'm talking with someone, like I mentioned, I was talking to another school just a moment ago, one of the persons on that call I'd not met before. And so what did I do? I looked her up on LinkedIn. Guess what? She looked me up too.
because that lets us, it shows that I'm interested and I want to know with whom I'm speaking, but it also lets you know a little bit more about that person's background. Maybe where did they go to college? There's a conversation starter right there. I see you went to San Diego State, just taking the time to get to know someone is important. Getting to know that company, whether it's a specific location or the corporate at large, show that you've spent time in doing your research. I can't, Dr. Keeley was one of our very first presenters. It was the first week we did this, and he gave the example of when he worked for a major candy company, and he didn't even say which one, a major candy company. And he was interviewing this young lady who he thought was a dynamic fit. And so he asked her, which one of our products do you most enjoy eating? And her response was, do you remember? I don't eat junk food.
Right.
Oh, wow. Oh, no.
Yeah, that's hopefully maybe she was going to go on to say, I don't like junk food, but I do enjoy this new nutritious snack that this company is making. I don't know. But know your company and speak the language. It's helpful. But LinkedIn, check out LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, you need to check out LinkedIn. It's not Facebook.
Excellent stuff. So let me turn this to something that's a little less about the job specifically, but I think inadvertently it is. But if I'm wrong, and then just we'll hear crickets for a moment, then we'll move on. What are the things in life, and I think list making probably is one of them, but are there other things in life that will just help me be more organized, and not organized for a job, but organized in life in such a way that will translate into job success?
Yeah, I think electronic platforms in general are, Andrea's got it. I thought she was pausing, so I was jumping in, but many apps that you can use for so many reasons. I know for me, it's, whether it's saving important documents, that if an employer needs to see XYZ, I can quickly access those things electronically. That's just the first thing that popped into my mind. But Andrea.
Yes. Well, playing off what you said, Melissa, certainly when you in your email, having an organization to your email, maybe I have files so that if it's related to something, I can move it to a file. I use my inbox there's only a few things in my inbox. That's also my to-do list. If something's in my inbox, it's something I have to do. Otherwise, it's in a folder. I don't keep it in my inbox.
Boy, those two things are great nuggets. So you're talking about organizing your email. And most of us, I hope by now, anyone who is either searching for a job or has one and wants to be active, where their email is a part of your normal communication at your workplace, it definitely is going to be in the future more and more. So you're saying that you organize your emails according to what's your inbox is your to-do list. Everything else has a place to go, and you put it in a place. Mail would be something like that, right? I mean, physical mail, we talk about that. Melissa, you mentioned having a filing system. I think that's what you're alluding to, in a way to keep up with documents.
Yeah.
So you're talking about organizing all your digital information so that it's at hand. Do you see any particular, you mentioned platforms, any applications that are helpful to use that? Do you have favorite calendar sources or anything like that? Do you think you could say, if I'm coming to this and saying, boy, where do I start? Where do I start?
For me, my Outlook calendar is my life. I mean, everything. And so is my email. Very much like Andrea, honestly, I've gotten to a point that I realize I have so many files that they're not helpful anymore. Which has become okay because now I just do searches. So try to be very purposeful in how I label the subject lines in my email so that I can easily search for emails. Because my files, I have too many files now, so they don't help it. I need files for my files in my email. But flagging, using the flag on your emails, if you're like Andrea and your inbox stays your to-do list, or if it's not, using the flagging system on your email so that you remember, okay, for me, if something's flagged, it means I need to do, before I go home, those flags need to be removed. That's important to me. For also considering using different email addresses. Obviously, I work for the University of Georgia, so my UGA stuff is all going to be in my UGA email.
use a different email for other things. Use a Gmail. Keep your personal life and your professional life separate. You're able, and my Gmail is not organized at all. So my UGA email is. But I was just going to say, one of the things that I found, and this may be silly, but it's one of my lifesavers. Also Teams. I use Microsoft Teams a lot for stuff. But I have an app on my phone. It's called Color Note, and it's like Post-it notes. And I won't tell you everything that's in there. It's ridiculous what's in there. But I use the Color Note system for keeping up with other things, especially like if I'm not near my computer and it's something lengthy, I'll put it on my Color Note and I can text it to myself or email it to myself. Just lots of different ways to, there's so many apps out there. Plenty.
Good. All right, go a little deeper in this. How important are things like, the reason I'm asking this question is because a popular speech that circulated for a while in social media several years back was presented by a U.S. Naval Admiral who talked about how important it was to make the bed in the morning. He said that this was one of the things that sets you on a pace, both having accomplished something. And Andrew mentioned being a list maker. I know I could testify with half my household that they will add a thing to a list that wasn't on the list in order to check the thing off the list, because that was such a satisfying activity, just checking off the list. That's not me, but it is the other 50% of my house. But I say that to say that things like ordering my life from the start of the day will change my own approach to both these topics, planning and organizing. Is that overkill, or would you agree?
I would agree. Something I learned long ago after Wendy's, I moved into the clothing industry and worked in a clothing store. And in a clothing store, everything is color coordinated. They go from light to dark. And then your shirts are in one area, your pants are in one area. If it's a dress or something long, it's in another area. So I just adopted that years ago, that my entire closet is color coordinated, excuse me. I did it for my children. I do it, so that's just how we live. And they like it. You can find it. Like, hey, I'm looking for my blue sweatshirt. I can pull my blue sweatshirt. If I'm looking for my whatever, it's there. And one other thing about being organized, I got very frustrated years ago and actually read this online, like on Pinterest or somewhere, but it was talking about, why do we keep clothes in our closet that we can't wear or we don't like or out of style, on and on and on. So I adopted this principle a couple of years ago that at the beginning of every year, I turn all the hangers backwards. And when I wear something, I turn it around. If the end of the year, if I haven't turned the hanger around, I just get rid of it. And the other thing that I do, I cannot buy anything new if I don't get rid of something old. So something always leaves and something new comes in. And again, it's just one of those things for me. I'm kind of always cleaning out my closet. And when you walk in and it's not just a jumbled up mess, that for me starts my day off great right after I make my bed.
That's fabulous. So I'm hearing something, and I'm not sure that you intended to say it, but I know that you if I gave you a chance, you would embrace this notion that maintaining organization is far easier than creating it. And so that one of the things that's going to help, the more I organize my life, the easier it is for everything to be organized, and these little steps are going to accumulate. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
And that must be true then we're talking about files. We're talking about, and this will be true if you're going to interview, if you're going to go for a job, you're going to need to know where your social security card is. You're going to have to, potentially, you're going to have some other documentation from the past. You're going to have to fill out some forms and be able to provide proof of the potential residency. There's a number of things you're going to have, and sometimes you might have to have this further. So knowing where those documents are. You mentioned a resume, knowing things like your GPA potentially is going to be important, the dates you worked at a place, maybe even some things about course information if your skills, the skills you have or credentials are essential, any licensing you might have. So there are a lot of things that I'm going to have organized for. We talked a lot about organizing. This plays into planning as well, but everything we've talked about, how can I be a better organizer and planner besides making a list, organizing, beginning to develop habits of organizing in my house, picking electronic platforms that are going to be able to help me, watching people at work who who get ahead to see what they do differently, learning to speak my boss's language. Are there any other things that are going to help me become a better planner or organizer?
That's a lot.
I think it's that creating the habit. I think creating
Yes.
is the big piece there. Pick one of those and start it. You're going to start. I think once you start seeing, or once you start to embrace the idea of organization, you start to, sort of attach it to different parts of your life. And I think getting started, but I think it's again, realizing if you are one of those persons that maybe needs a little help with organization. Like in my case, I told my kids, you need help with organization.
Well, and there would be no shame if I were one of them, rather than feeling like I need to, say I always have it together, to be able to say, hey, you're organized, I'm not. Can you help me start a system? Or maybe you even know some things like for example, I use a system called the Full Focus Planner. It's just something from me. It was a very helpful system by a guy who used to be the head of a book publishing house and now does just leadership things. And so I like his system. So if I were to say, I'm not very organized, can you help me be that way? That may be a great place for someone to start too. If I need some help, go to a parent. You mentioned a professor earlier. Go to somebody who's just a friend, I think, that's organized. Andrea and I were in school years ago. I might have said, hey, Andrea, I'm a mess. You're not. Can you help me figure this out? But to find someone who can help me get started, who's going to be gracious and not judge me because I think that I don't have this together yet, but who's also going to help me be honest with where things are and how to take steps where they need to be. Would you say having a friend who's going to help me through this process, if I'm not there yet, might be a really good thing to do?
I would say yes. And also for people, and again, it's a process. I was not as organized as I am today as I was as a teenager, but I've always been sort of organized. I just like things to be orderly. But you have to just say, okay, here's the one first thing I'm going to do to be organized. Because if you said, okay, hey, I really liked what that lady said, and I'm going to organize my closet, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you're going to get very frustrated. Because if that's not who you are, you can't start out jumping in, like to the deep end of that. So pick one thing. Maybe, hey, I like what you said about, organizing this or that. Start with the one thing.
That is so freeing, because I would be like that. I would think I can never do this. That's just too many things. So pick a thing, start there, and accumulate. And that's the beauty of this. Everything we've talked about, we've said these are things that are essential to every job. They're essential to success, no matter what your job is, but they can be developed. So there's nothing here we're talking about that has to be full force automatic from day one. Everything can be accumulated. Excellent. Melissa, what else do we need to add? And Lee, please do jump in before we conclude our time together. Number one, are there questions that have come from those who are watching? And what else have we not covered that we need to say about planning and organizing before we finish today?
I got one thing just that I made a note that didn't fit anywhere else. But we talked about when you may actually go to a physical interview. If you don't know where the location is, GPS it and go the day before.
Absolutely. Great idea.
Yeah. Because just you were late because you didn't know where you were going doesn't sound very good. Put forth that effort and make sure you know where you're going ahead of time.
I'll add to that because I did an interview in Atlanta one time, and make sure that when you do your navigation, your point to point, you do it at the time you'll be traveling. So that way you know what time to leave, because traffic changes. Absolutely. So you want to make sure you're leaving early enough.
Smart.
Excellent. That is fabulous. So I love that you said that, because the 10 o'clock travel time through Atlanta is not going to be the same as the 7 o'clock. Good stuff. That's great. Listen, so we've talked about so many things. Andrea, what you've brought is just a wealth of insight. I'm so grateful for what you've done, for who you are and for what you offer. Melissa, Lee, you all have just given so much for those of us who need to develop it, and for those who maybe have it naturally to know where to put some of that emphasis, or how to be able to work with those who aren't as much and know there's more than one way. As my grandparents would have said, more than one way I'm not even going to say that because it's probably insensitive now. Never mind. So I think on the
I
fly.
said it too.
So you've given us lists, you've given us prioritization. I think one of the things that came out of what we just said is preparation is an essential part of organization. If I'm going to be there, I need to plan ahead and be ready for whatever's coming and know my timeline toward that. We've talked about personal order and disciplines to do that, keeping up with documents, developing it. And I will add one more thing in here that I tell those in my household I'm responsible for. Don't be afraid to set an alarm or two. One of us mentioned this a little while ago, but I have alarms going off all day long because I know that I'm not going to remember it well, but I have a digital device that remembers everything exactly like I tell it to. And so whether yours is Alexa or Siri or some other, electronic guru, don't be afraid to set alarms and use that calendar system, but start somewhere at an improvement or development for organizations. Is that fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Excellent. Well, we are just about at the end of our time. Andrea Griffin, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Just a solid gold guest, and we're grateful for that. Any closing thoughts we need to know about you or organization or First National or anything else that goes into this career insight?
Okay, I just have one helpful tip. If you're just going to start with the one thing, buy a hook and put your keys on the hook. That's your first thing to get organized. I have a key hook. My kids know where it is, and it's not by the door. Don't put it by the door because but put it somewhere. And we all put our keys on the hooks because the most frustrating thing is trying to get out the door and you can't find your keys.
Absolutely. Fantastic. It would be terrible to have that perfect interview and be entirely ready and not be able to get there. Well, Andrea, thank you so much. Lee, thank you for everything. Melissa, as usual, you're all aces, and I'm so grateful to that. Thank you for everyone who's on this webinar. We're glad you're here. It's all about making things better for our community, for each of us, and increasing and growing our workforce and getting you more prepared to make more money at a better job and get you where you need to be. So, Melissa, I'm going to give you the closing thoughts, and then we're going to be dismissed, and you can remind us about next week, which is technology use.
Yeah, well, I guess the only thing I can say is go update your calendars, or if you don't have one, go create one. But yeah, next week we're down to our last two sessions. Actually, we've gone through communication, teamwork, problem solving, teachability, and today the planning and organizing. Next week, use, and I can tell you we have some amazing people who are going to be part of the session. I won't tell you who they are because you're going to want to tune in for this. So next week's technology use and its importance in getting and keeping a job. And then our final week will be on professional soft skills and self-management. So we are winding this down. So looking forward to next week.
So thank you, everyone. We are grateful to have this time with you and look forward to seeing you a week from today. So long.